Yes, welcome to the Vanguard Show Podcast. Today is June 20th, Sunday, and I'm joined by Brother Obi Egbuna. Is it right, brother? I want to make sure I don't.
Obi Egbuna Jr.
Oh, okay, Obi Egbuna Jr. Right on, brother. Well, Brother Obi is a artist. He's an activist. He's an internationalist, and you're originally from Harare, Zimbabwe, right?
No,
No,
no.
okay, all right. Well, tell me, where are you from?
Nigeria.
Nigeria. Okay,
On my dad's side, yeah.
okay. What part of Nigeria?
Um, what was then Anambra State, the village of Ozobolo.
Oh, okay, all right. All
Mhm.
right, now is that southeast, northeast, geographically where that would be in Nigeria?
It's in an area um to the like the northeast.
Okay, all right, all right.
Hmm.
Well, brother, I want to kind of go on a geographic journey with you because you've been so many places and lived all over. So give me a chronology on
Yeah.
you living around the world as well as the roots of your activism and your artistry.
Okay. Well, with the in terms of life itself, um, it's correction. I just wanted to make sure I was correct. Anambra State is in the southeastern region
Oh,
of Nigeria,
okay,
the southeastern region.
okay.
I
That's
said I
Igbo.
said the east. Yes, 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 yes.
Igbo, like yes, yes, yeah. For me, I'm
Mhm.
at least through DNA, I was Igbo.
Oh, okay. So my
Yeah.
my formal education starts there. I was born in
Okay.
London, England,
Okay.
on October 8th, 1969.
Okay.
I lived there till 1972. Don't remember it at all.
Oh, okay. All right.
Um, I went to Nigeria and I was there till 1976.
Hmm.
And then my father was invited to the Writers Workshop program at the University of Iowa. So we came there. And then after he completed his master's program there, he was invited to be part of a doctoral program at Howard University. So I came to DC in the fall of 1978. My elementary, junior high, what is now called middle school, high school, university are all in DC. Deal and Alice Deal and Lincoln Junior High Schools, Calvin Coolidge High School, Bancroft Elementary, and I graduated in 1992 from the University of the District of Columbia, which is an HBCU. So that's the academic part of things. My political activity, the very first political act at the age of 9, marching in African Liberation Day in May of 1979. So we did that, and then took a hiatus, of course, distractions, temptations, and at the age of 19, turning 20 is when I decided to give my life to struggle. So I've been an organizer since 1989, 1990, and been through a few organizations. I'm a co-founder of an organization that went through different transformations within a 14-year period. It started out as the United Pan-African Front, then it became the Pan-African Student Youth United Front, then the Pan-African Student Youth Movement, then the Pan-African Liberation Organization. So that you're talking like from 1990 to 2007, 2008. Um, in 2006, I joined the Zimbabwe Cuba Friendship Association in Zimbabwe. So I've been, that's one of the vehicles. And in 2010, I'm a co-founder of the Mass Emphasis Children's History and Theater Company. And I'm the advisor to the Mass Emphasis Positive Action and Creativity Youth Brigade. So through service, the skills I've picked up, I'm an organizer first and foremost, but I'm a teacher. I've been teaching African history to children for 31 years, K through 12.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
I'm a journalist. I'm the first U.S. correspondent to the Herald, Zimbabwe's national newspaper, in the 41-year history of the country. Um, I said I'm a children's playwright, so those are the skill sets in terms of just organizing. So that briefly encapsulates everything a lot.
Okay.
but not all of it, but enough.
Okay. Well, I was going to say that I think it's Picasso once said, our goal in life is to discover our gift. Our purpose in life is to give it away or share it. When
Yeah.
did you first discover you had this tremendous gift of multiple talents and
Um,
interests?
Actually, it wasn't even about, it was more just studying struggle
Mm,
and taking a look at some of the most significant contributors to our struggle. In addition to their passion for liberation, in addition to them embracing their historical responsibility to struggle for our total liberation, when it came to strategies and methodology, they had skills.
right.
Ida B. Wells is a journalist par excellence.
Oh, yes.
Daisy Bates is a journalist par excellence. J. A. Rogers, journalist. George Padmore, journalist.
Yeah.
David Sebeko, senior journalist.
Right.
Um, Edward Wilmot Blyden, journalist. Amilcar Cabral, agronomist. George Washington Carver, agronomist. So when I was in my late 20s, I said, we are, without question, committed on the political front, but we have to develop some skills and talents that give us the ability to maneuver, give us the ability to engage all sectors of our community.
Mm,
And so through that process, the journalism came. Through that process, the teaching came. And of course, when we look at teachers, Mangalizo Sabuk, Robert Sabukwe, founder of the PAC, teacher. Julius Nyerere, teacher.
right.
Robert Mugabe, teacher. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, teacher.
Right.
Um, Marva Collins, teacher. Um, Lucy Craft Laney, teacher. So when you begin to study struggle, you look at how these people were able to make contributions through these different skills. So we just looked at people who had these same skills and realized that these are skills that we needed to develop and we needed to harness so we could maximize our potential when we make our contributions and what have you. So that was the process that we took ourselves through. The artistic aspect is last for me. That didn't start till 2010. Since 2010, I have written 25 plays
Wow.
for children.
Okay.
The Mass Emphasis Children's History and Theater Company, it's a decolonization weapon. It's in the tradition of the pioneers of the revolution that the great Thomas Sankara had in Burkina Faso, or the Youth Pioneer Institute that Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah had going on in Ghana.
Mm,
Um, and of course, the incredible work that Ahmed Sekou Touré did through the Democratic Party of Guinea for Children and what have you. So it's inspired by that. But interestingly enough, the first reminder of that, or the first challenge to embrace that discipline, came from Kwame Ture.
mm,
I was with him in 1995, accompanying him to the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and the University of Maryland, College Park, those two engagements he had that day. So we were in the car, we pick him up from the airport, and there's a Santana song playing. It's a rendition of Ole Tunji's Yoruba song,
okay.
and it's off the 1964 Drums of Passion album. So
Mm,
Kwame blurts out, "Who's that paying homage to Ole Tunji?" And we said, "Oh, that's Santana." So Kwame said, "Emil Cabral says return to the source. You know, he got that from Ole Tunji. 1964 Drums of Passion album. What you too young to know about that?" So I started laughing. I said, I had both tapes on my dresser. I took the wrong one off. I meant to take the Olatunji one. I should have brought
uh,
both.
okay. All
And then he says, the stuff we're trying to push politically has been in the art and the culture long before. We're trying to catch up. So 10 minutes go by after he says this, and he smacks me on the shoulder and he said he wants to apologize. And I say, apologize for what?
right.
And he said, your father was doing that when we were babies in struggle. And
Wow.
what he was referring to was before my father co-founded the Black Panther Party in London
Mm,
and co-founded launched the Black Power movement in London simultaneously.
mm,
In 1964, he wrote a book called Wind versus Polygamy. And it was Festac, it was Britain's offering to the infamous Festac conference in Dakar, Senegal in January of 66.
mm.
So he got a chance to rub shoulders with Duke Ellington,
Oh, wow.
Langston Hughes, Sarah Webster Fabio. And after that, and so before he became politically active, he was doing things artistically. And that book played a major role in spreading African continent-born African literature throughout the diaspora, primarily in Europe.
Okay.
So so he went on to do other books like The Anthill, Emperor of the Sea, The Madness of Didi, The Minister's Daughter, Daughters of the Sun. So my father was known for contributing both politically and culturally. And since one of our biggest struggles is to make our cultural and political expression synonymous, that, but so interestingly enough, so when we started doing plays, I hadn't thought about, and so Kwame said, when are you going to get serious and start doing that work? So I'm 25 years old at the time.
Okay.
5 years old politically. So I said, man, I've never even thought about it. So interestingly enough, about 7 years ago, we did a children's play called Same Neighborhood, Different Perspectives, a conversation between General Colin Powell and Kwame Ture. Because in case you don't know and your listeners don't know,
right.
General Powell and Brother Kwame went to the same elementary school in the Bronx.
In the Bronx,
They're
right.
4 years apart.
Okay.
And obviously they see the world differently.
Oh, absolutely.
Colin Powell masterminded the invasion of Grenada, which led to the assassination of Maurice Bishop. Kwame Ture, through the All African People's Revolutionary Party, defended Maurice Bishop and the New Jew movement. Kwame Ture, as a young man in SNCC, they are primarily responsible, being the first organization to come out against the draft in this country. Colin Powell enjoyed Vietnam so much, he served 2 tours. So Colin Powell masterminded the first bombing of Libya, April 15th, 1986, which claimed the life of 2-year-old Hana Gaddafi. Kwame Ture was marching with the Libyans, saying bombs in Africa will eventually get you bombs in North America. So to make the point, their perspective. So it was only then that I reflected in that conversation, and I had to chuckle to myself. You know what I mean? That he was
I think your sound went out. Check your sound.
to Paul Robeson.
Oh, okay, I got you. I got you back. Your sound had went out.
Yeah, okay. We did a piece called Y'all Understand Exactly What I'm Saying, and it was paying homage to Paul Robeson. So it begins with Paul Robeson speaking about colonialism in Africa. Then one of the young children attacks Paul Robeson playing Jackie Robinson like he did before the House of Un-American Activities Committee. Another child responds being Paul Robeson. Then we had a few children. We have some poems we've written for children. One is called We All Love Our Mother, and the other one is called No More, No More, which chronicles the name changing of the nations once we gained political independence, how the Gold Coast became Ghana, how British Tanganyika became Tanzania, how Northern and Southern Rhodesia became Zambia and Zimbabwe, how British Nyasaland and Portuguese East Africa became Malawi and Mozambique, and how Upper Volta became Burkina Faso. So we have a poem that chronicles that. So we had one of our Cameroonian students recite that in Mugamo. We had one of our Ethiopian students recite that in Amharic. We had one of our Nigerian students recite that in Igbo. Then we did a poem called No More, No More. And then we had 2 children recite that in English and Kiswahili. And then we have another child who recited it in Spanish. And of course, that was paying tribute to Paul Robeson's multilingualism. And so we've developed a project called the Paul Robeson Linguistic Project. As since the 1960s, our people have been speaking Kiswahili within North American borders, but so many Africans come to North America on a daily basis. When we rub shoulders with each other, we should be practicing our languages or sharing these languages.
Okay. Well, you and I have a connection to Kwame Ture, as he's probably known by most of the other world as Stokely Carmichael. I met him in Ghana, West Africa, in Accra, and he was the first one to challenge me. And he was really the first living mentor that I've ever had, because he got me connected with Brother Nee. I don't know if you remember Brother Nee. In South Africa as well. With he hooked up me with the Sabecos.
Nee Ade?
Nee, yes. Yeah. And thing is, he was just so impactful in my life. But talk about the connection you have to the Sabeco family, which I didn't know prior to this? I think we talked about it a little bit, but
Yeah,
explain that relationship.
and in 1990, when we started the United Pan-African Front, one of our founding members, Chris Gaines, went to Howard University with David Sebeco Jr. And in case your listeners don't know who we're talking about the family of David Sebeco Sr., who was the foreign minister of the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, the second liberation movement created in Azania, South Africa, on April 6, 1959, where the young people of the ANC Youth League left the ANC because they wouldn't deal with the question of land. And they coined the slogan, Izwele Thui Africa, the land is ours, just so people know who we're talking about. And his wife, Elizabeth Sebeco, was the first PAC cadre woman member to go through guerrilla training. So this is the family that Malik and I are connected to. So I met them in 1990. We went to New York at least 4 times that summer, and we were just telling them about the organization that we had created. And so they talked to us about connecting us with the youth wing of PAC, but they just were talking to us about the importance of not falling into the trap of the 60s generation.
Yeah, I think your sound went back out, brother. I believe your sound just
In
went out.
1968.
Oh, okay. You're back.
So going through them,
Mhm.
so learning from them about PAC, being introduced by them to the PAC representatives in DC, the Shishibe family, the late Nana Shishibe and her husband Jerry, being introduced to Nozifo Bam Glenn in Ohio, and some of the other PAC comrades that were here as exiles. The Sebeco family made it possible for them. And interestingly enough, so when I think about how that has expanded into doing work in Zimbabwe on the level that we do it. We owe that to them because one of the other things that they not only talk to us about PAC, ANC, and AZAPO, but they talk to us about the value of Frelimo in Mozambique, the value of MPLA in Angola, the value of SWAPO and SWANU in Namibia. So we got a real thorough understanding of Southern Africa. That was very important for us for a couple of reasons. Number one, we live in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. doesn't have its first democratic elections for mayor till 1978 when Marion Barry becomes mayor, who was sent to D.C. by the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee to start a home rule movement in D.C. So when you look at the chronology, Mozambique gets its independence in 74, Angola gets its independence in 75, Zimbabwe gets its independence in 1990, 80. Namibia gets its independence in 1990, and what's called South Africa gets its flag independence in 1994. So the parallel was there. And then they advised us and arranged for us to help organize the funeral service for Zephaniah Motapane, who was the advisor to the Black Consciousness Movement during the Soweto Uprising, and let us bow our heads to our comrades in Soweto. Our people made the mistake in this country of celebrating Juneteenth in isolation from the Day of the African Child, which we've been celebrating since 1992 on the 16th. And the reason that day is picked is because of Soweto. So moving forward, next year, we're appealing to our sisters and brothers in U.S. borders to celebrate the Day of the African Child and Juneteenth together. We must reject the amputated narrative of the African experience. But with that being said, getting back to the Sebeco thing, so that's how we were connected to them. So,
and didn't you go to school with is it Timba? Did you go to school with Timba?
No. I know Timba, Bongani, and David Jr. through Chris Gaines.
Through Chris Gaines.
My comrade Chris Gaines went to Howard with David.
Oh, okay, all right.
And I met David a few years later in New York, and like I said, we used to stay with them every time we went there. So we had the opportunity to meet Ma Sebeco. We had the opportunity to really spend time. But the ones who really talked us through PAC's political history were David Jr. and Bongani. But Bongani also did an excellent job of sharing with us PAC's historical efforts to build, maintain, and consolidate ties with the organized organizations in this country. So he talked about when PAC encountered the AAPRP to us, when they encountered Huey Newton to us, when they encountered the New African organizations, PGRNA, NAPO. Um, very happy to know that, and that served us very well moving forward.
Okay. And I want to also kind of go back to your father. He was a member of the British Black Panthers. I don't think many people know.
He's a co-founder.
Co-founder of the British Black Panthers. And a lot of people in America don't know that, how significant it was. Yeah, talk about that.
You cut off the history of the Panthers in London, the Panthers in Australia, the Panthers in Syria, the Panthers in Jordan, the Panthers in India. So the Black Panther concept was Pan-African, but good news, thanks to Black Classic Press and the great Paul Coates.
Yes.
My father's book is being re-released by the end of this year, and it was called Destroy This Temple. Okay. And it chronicles the struggle to build the Black Panther Party in Britain. And it's going to be very helpful for people because their Black power and the Black Panther were inseparable. Right. So that means the nationalism was strong. Because of my father's cultural makeup, the Pan-African aspect of it was extremely strong. So Africa was not treated like another part of the solar system. Africa was not treated like it was foreign to us. So there was a connection. And another good thing about that was he came of age politically at a time when things were really bubbling in London. So right around that same time, Fela Kuti was there studying music. Right around that same time, Maurice Bishop was there studying law at Gray's Inn. Right around that time, the Garveyite Tony Martin was organizing Caribbean-born students. Walter Rodney and his brother Eddie Rodney were there. So he got a chance to, and CLR James as an elder was there. So he got a chance to rub shoulders with these people, and it did a lot for him. And what they did was on the heels of, the Fifth Pan-African Congress. They would be the children of all that energy since that happened in 1945. So organizers always wonder what the next generation is going to do after them of quality, of importance, of significance, of magnitude. So they got a chance to see these young people. And my father first connected with Kwame Ture in London at the Dialectics of Liberation Conference in 1967. And there they did a comparison together of Black power in London and Black power in the United States. And then from there, and right within that cluster, which the book is going to talk about, my father came to the United States. And according to him, there were three experiences that captured the essence of his trip. He had audience with a Native American elder in New Mexico. He had a chance to go to the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee's headquarters in Atlanta, in Vine City, where you are right now. Right. And then the highlight of his trip, he said, and these are his words, he was hosted in the home of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So, and I think that's very important because obviously when people talk about the fallout between the messenger and Brother Malcolm, people highlight the messenger's indifference to nationalism. But here he is within a 2-year period having a sit down with the voice, one of the main voices of Black power in the United States, Kwame Ture, and one of the main voices of Black power in London, Obi Egbuna Jr. So it shows that, so he got a chance to see how the nationalism that Malcolm pushed aggressively and uncompromisingly resonated with his younger brothers and sisters. Okay. So I think it's a very important piece to tie in.
Absolutely. I don't know if you're aware of the second generation or second wave of the Panther movement, not only in London, but also Los Angeles and around the country here.
Yeah, I've been following it.
Yes. Matter of fact, there was a group that carried on, I guess, the spirit of the British Black Panthers, and they were called Panther. and they actually came to Los Angeles to meet with my group. So there was a generational connection in which we got a chance to do some work in the communities and things like that.
That's
How
good.
important is it to cross this this divide via the ocean in terms of, we are
Cross-generational?
generations? Yeah, how important is that?
Oh, that makes or breaks you as an organizer, unless you're going to be like Columbus and think you discovered something that was already there. We cannot be historically dismissive. We have to be historically responsible.
Right.
You cannot claim to be historically responsible if you're historically dismissive. Every issue you take on as an organizer through an organization, you have to study the organizations who did the work before you for two reasons. Number one, you can expand on their work, the positive things, the impactful things, the groundbreaking things, and then you can dare to correct their mistakes.
Okay.
So it's necessary. So anything we do, we can tell you, like, for example, right now, last year, we did an appeal pushing for Cuban medical personnel to be granted access to United States borders. So the reason we did not do a petition, we did an appeal because we were paying homage to David Walker. We were paying homage to the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who did an appeal to white America in 1923. We were paying homage to Dr. W.B. Du Bois, who did an appeal in 1947 to the United Nations that Eleanor Roosevelt, while on the board of directors of the NAACP, did everything to stop. Typical white liberal behavior.
Right.
And of course, what Brother Malcolm was planning, and of course the NYPD, FBI, and CIA had other ideas. So the fact that we were able to be versed in that history impacted on us creating an appeal, and many people signed on to it all over the world. Everybody from the National Council of Churches to Mumia Abu-Jamal to Russell Maroon Schultz to the daughter of Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, the Honorable Samia Nkrumah. And the reason we did that is because, once again, looking at the history, Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was the first president, head of state in the world to acknowledge the triumph of the Cuban Revolution. So when you take on an issue, you learn about the people who did the work before you, and that's how we were trained to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. Tell us about the Roots Public Charter School.
It is my training ground. Over the years, I have taught at Muhammad University of Islam in DC, the Aya Educational Institute in Atlanta, Fawahode Sua in Atlanta, the Sankofa Homeschool Community, public schools all up and down Highway 80 in Alabama, from Birmingham all the way to Montgomery, primarily in Marion, Alabama, and Selma. So all of that was made possible by my training at Roots through Kamal Robinson, who is now an ancestor, and one of the unsung heroines in the African Independent School movement, Dr. Benita Thompson, who I feel, when the history of the African Independent School history is written, she's going next to Lucy Craft Laney and Mary McLeod Bethune and Clara Muhammad and many others. Roots has been going on since the 1970s and it's still going strong. And she's very flexible intellectually. Believe it or not, there are a lot of African independent schools that feel that our approach to the narrative is a little too militant. And we feel that that is the struggle that we're going through right now. We are seeking to transform the island of Black excellence into a training ground for African resistance. And we know that a lot of people may not want that per se, but she's completely embracing. So that's a testament to her objectivity. So I've been affiliated with them since 1990. This was my very first year teaching all subjects. I just primarily teach, when I go places, I teach African history and drama.
Okay. And tell me about the mass emphasis children's history and theater company.
So like we said, it's been around since 2010. We have written 25 plays. We just did our new one on Friday. We did another one last month called A Sister's Touch on Struggle, where we paid homage to the National Association of Colored Women, which was created in 1896, which Harriet Tubman co-founded, which Ida B. Wells co-founded, which Mary Church Terrell co-founded, which Margaret Murray Washington co-founded, which Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin, the first African woman to have a newspaper in this country, brought together. So so we do plays all the time. And in the last couple of years, we had a spinoff called the Mass Emphasis Positive Action and Creativity Youth Brigade. So just last year, we had a 16-year-old a 20-year-old and a 21-year-old do a 8-minute, 30-second documentary called Get Out of Cuba Way, demanding for Cuban medical personnel in the form of the Henry Reed Medical Brigade to come here, which shows people that our children, in less time than it took naked police terrorists to take the life of George Floyd in Minnesota, in less time than it took to do that, our children created a documentary standing strong with the Cuban people in the Cuban Revolution. So 3 years ago, we had a 10-year-old and 13-year-old, two DJs, do a visual mixtape tribute to Kwame Ture on his birthday. A few years ago, we had some children do a mini doc called Don't Play These Roles, appealing to our actors and actresses that based on the current climate or the historical climate, because it's part of the culture, it's part of this country's fabric, that our actors and actresses should not play police officers on television or in film, should not play intelligence agents in television or in film, should not play military officers, intelligence or in film. So these are the type of projects that children do, but in addition, so some of the other plays we've done, we did a play called Cuba's Greatest Army, a tribute to the Cuban doctors. We did a play about Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah and Thomas Sankara, the first president of Burkina Faso, which was performed in front of Thomas Sankara's family in Washington. They were completely shocked. We did a play called Standing Strong 1965, which captured some of the key activities in 1965, beginning with the death of Lorraine Hansberry in January, Brother Malcolm's assassination, the assassination of Pio Pinto in Kenya, the overthrow of Ahmed Ben Bella in Algeria, Ian Smith declaring the Universal Declaration of Independence in Southern Rhodesia. On my son's welcoming to DC, we did a play called Araminta and Samora, treating the sick, liberating the oppressed, about the lives of Harriet Tubman and Samora Machel. The people who don't know, the first president of Mozambique, Samora Machel, before he joined the revolution, he was a nurse. And his first political activity was protesting the difference in pay between indigenous Mozambican nurses and Portuguese nurses. His middle name is Moises, which means Moses in English. So we have two Moseses that were nurses that were liberated. Samora Machel.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, when Mozambique started their armed struggle, they had to get training, they had to escape Mozambique and go to Tanzania, where Julius Nyerere and Tanu would train them. So they developed an escape route after studying the Underground Railroad, for people who don't know that. So these are the advantages of fighting aggressively and uncompromisingly against the amputated narrative of the African experience, which the enemies of our community continue to try to shove down our throat through museums, through curriculums, through films, and whatever other vehicles they have. So in the spirit of culture warfare, we have to be ready to counter it at all times. So that's what mass emphasis represents. I hope I answered your question about that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And tell me, not only the efforts, I support the efforts and the Cuban people as well, in the struggle to get from under this embargo. Talk about the effect of this embargo that the USA
To be precise, it's a blockade.
Blockade, right?
It's all out.
Right.
To give people a modern explanation, a modernized, updated explanations, they can look no further than the inauguration speech of the first inauguration of former U.S. President Barack Obama, since that's the president we've paid the most attention to. He said, the might of our military must be matched by the strength of our diplomacy. So what that means is that the United States, based on their political culture, even though their preference is to assassinate a leader who they can't control, even though their preference is to bomb a nation into submission that they can't control, they have no problem trying to starve that nation to death, to engage in diplomatic stifling and heresy, which will cause that country to not be able to deal with their basic necessities. So since the blockade imposed on Cuba in 1962 comes on the heels of a failed invasion attempt called the U.S. Bay of Pigs invasion. So when a Democrat named Kennedy imposed this blockade, the goal was to crush the economy, making it impossible for them to treat their sick, educate their people, empower their women, feed their children. And even though the blockade has cost them nearly $200 billion in 59 years, The beautiful thing is, of course, we know their attributes. They have the highest literacy rate in the world. They have the lowest infant mortality rate in the world. Their healthcare system is second to none. They have the most advanced gerontology program in the world, one of the most advanced programs to combat autism in children in the world. They have a project in conjunction with the mighty people of Venezuela called Operation Project Miracle, where the goal is to eradicate blindness in the Americas. So in spite of the blockade, they've been able to do this. And we as Africans have been the beneficiaries of this service. So the second phase of our project, the Get Out of Cuba Way movement and campaign, is to begin by the end of this year establishing formally a resource pool to assist their efforts on the African continent, because they have 4,000 doctors dispersed throughout Africa who not only treat the sick, Brother Malik and listeners, but train the future doctors of these countries who have made a declaration that they're going to remain in their countries and reverse the brain drain. So they're not going to bring their talents to New York or to Washington or to France or to Australia or to Amsterdam or to Denmark. They're going to stay in Burkina Faso, stay in Ghana, stay in Mozambique, stay in Angola, stay in Zimbabwe, stay in Namibia, stay in Seychelles, stay in Sierra Leone, stay in Liberia. So we feel the time has come to be able to support them. And we feel that's the best investment we can make in Africa at this historical moment. Why do we say that? At a time where they are 784 million people on the planet who live on $1.90 a day or less. 400 million of them can be found in Africa. Of the 25 poorest nations in the world, 22 of them are in Africa. Of the 53 countries who receive what is called least developed country status, who are labeled that, 37 of them are in the African continent. So based on the historical moment, as the gap between the wealthy and the poor is wider than it's ever been in the history of the human race, here we are as Africans in the diaspora in a pivotal position to be able to support Cuba's efforts on the African continent while we still fight for them to come here. Right. So when we think of and the reason they do that, because the African nations can't afford to send all their children to medical school in Cuba to take advantage of the scholarships. Okay. And of course, we're trying to get more of our young people. 200 young people since 2000 have gone to Cuba for medical training in the United States, based on an agreement signed between the Cuban government and the Congressional Black Caucus. So we are saying for every Trayvon Martin, let's have a Charles Drew. For every Oscar Grant, let's have a Daniel Hale Williams. For every Sandra Bland, let's have a Barbara Justice. So this is how we're combating that. But yeah, so that's our way of, so by the end of this year, and in addition to that, in terms of the campaign, what else we've been able to do, we've done 2 concerts, and since last July, we've had 10 African artists from 10 African nations participate, 8 Caribbean nations, 17 US cities, and 5 European Union countries. Never been done before in history, artistically, in terms of solidarity for Cuba. So the reason we're doing it is because it's heavily centered around the efforts to support their health efforts on the African continent and to campaign for them to be able to come to the United States. We were fighting for them to come to the Gulf region during Hurricane Katrina. Before that, we were fighting for them to come to New York City with the support of Councilman Charles Barron, who's now an assemblyman. We were fighting for them to come to DC when DC General, the public hospital in DC, closed down in 2003, leaving the southeast section of the city without a level 1 trauma center or prenatal unit. And this work, once again, you talking about tracing our work back, this is a continuation of the work of Booker T. Washington, who started National Negro Health Month in this country in 1915 before he left us. Dr. Du Bois, following the momentum of the Philadelphia Negro, the sociological experiment, did another sociological experiment called the Physique and Health of the Negro American, showing that in the early 1900s, we were more vulnerable medically than we were when our people lived on plantations. Mm-hmm. So this is a fight that we've been having a long time, and we should not confine it or restrict it to the never-ending level score between Democrats and Republicans. So this is the reason why we came up with something that we innovative, that we think is going to capture the imagination of the masses of our people.
And talk about Cuba's role as the refuge for Black liberation fighters. I think of Robert Williams. I think of Huey P. Newton. I think of so many.
Yes.
Explain that. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, it actually goes back, Brother Malik. The
Yeah.
mistake that we make is sometimes we start the link to Cuba in 1959, understandably so.
Yes.
But they were 300 rebellions by captives in Cuba. We don't use the word slavery. They had 300. The first all-African political party in the Western Hemisphere was created in Cuba in 1908, 1 year before the NAACP was created, called Partido Independiente de Color, which means the Independent Party of Color. The Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey had 45 branches of the UNIA in Cuba. So the ties to Cuba predate the Cuban Revolution, but the Cuban Revolution reinforced why we must. And the most famous rebellion on the level of Nat Turner's rebellion, on the level of Kofi's rebellion in Guyana, on the level of the Maroons' rebellion in Jamaica and in Suriname, and the level of the Haitian Revolution was a rebellion by an African named Jose Aponte. And he was beheaded by the Spanish conquistadors, and his head was put in a cage to serve as a method of intimidation. On a more fruitful note, a harmonious note, Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie were making albums with Machito in the 1940s.
Yes.
Sonia Sanchez tells of her encounter with Nicholas Guillen, the African who was called the Langston Hughes of Cuba, who became the poet laureate of the revolution. She said when she met him for the first time, he just came up to her crying. He couldn't sing Como se Langston. So the ties to Cuba are old, and of course, they were reinforced through the decision to protect Assata Shakur and Nehande Obi Egbuna and Robert Williams before them. It was reinforced when they gave Thomas Sankara the Jose Marti Award, Cuba's highest honor, in 1984, and then came back in 1985 and gave it to Robert Mugabe. And then in 1990, gave it to Madiba Nelson Mandela. It was reinforced when they vaccinated safely 3.5 million children in Burkina Faso. It was reinforced when between 1986 and 1996, 3,000 Zimbabwean teachers went to Cuba for training on the island of Youth, which is the reason that Zimbabwe has a 97% literacy rate today. It was reinforced when they did what they did in Liberia and Sierra Leone and Guinea during the Ebola pandemic 5 years ago. Okay. So it is a history of solidarity. It is a history of service. And true solidarity is when you seek to complement the solidarity for the purpose of enhancing solidarity. And as a matter of fact, dare I say, it is no longer solidarity, it is camaraderie.
Right.
We've gone from solidarity to camaraderie. So we owe it to Cuba to fight to get this blockade lifted, and we owe it to them to support their health efforts on the African continent, giving our people an alternative to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, giving them an alternative to the Bush Foundation. As Bush, the biggest highway in Ghana is named after George Bush, because he's a born-again humanitarian, as he'll let us believe. Well, this is an alternative to the United States Agency for International Development. So with all of our people talking about investment in Africa, but are based on a lack of exposure, embracing a neo-colonialist paradigm, being the mouthpiece for the Corporate Council on Africa, being a mouthpiece for the Council of Foreign Relations, there's no need for us to go in the soapbox about that. On a practical level, we have the alternative. And if people in the spirit of all the people that we're talking about want to embrace that, then, there's always room for them, and we'd love to work with them.
Okay. Let's segue to telling us about the Art to Life design company. You have a company.
That's a mistake on Facebook.
Okay. All right.
What that is.
Oh, okay. All right. You have a coalition of dancers or
something?
No. Oh, okay. All right.
Our main artistic contribution is through the Mass Emphasis Children's History and Theater Company. We're with the babies.
Okay, all right.
I don't know how that got on my Facebook page, and I need to get that taken off.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wanted to know more about it, but I obviously don't need to talk about it.
What we've also done, though, is our good friend, our brother, Mutulu Olubala, affectionately known as M1 of the internationally acclaimed hip-hop group Dead Prez. From 2014 to 2016, we did 3 albums of music called The Battle Cry for Cuba and Zimbabwe. And it's music, multi-genre, cross-generational, artists from all over the world, creating offerings calling for the lifting of the sanctions on Zimbabwe and the blockade on Cuba. And because we recognize that sanctions from imperialists are diplomatic terrorism. And what's going on in Venezuela validates that assertion. What's going on in Cuba validates that. What's going on in Zimbabwe validates that. What our beautiful people in Eritrea were subjected to for 10 years validates that assertion. So we can no longer allow our former colonizers and kidnappers to use diplomatic terrorism when they cannot have their way. They would preferably try to wipe us off the face of the earth. But if the political climate does not permit that, they have no problem watching your baby starve to death, our elderly starve to death. So we got to organize to stop them.
Okay. Well, there's usually someone or even a movement that inspires an individual. And you seem like you had so many inspirations that you actually knew these people. But who would you say that people need to pay a little more attention to kind of learn, about the struggle, about, it could be a variety of people, but who inspired you outside of your father and what have you?
Oh, I mean, shoot, multitudes of people. Man, where could I begin? I have an affinity for people behind the scenes.
Okay.
So when you hear me, I guess you hear Kwame Ture's, and
yes,
I spent 8 years with him.
Yes.
But people like Ella Baker, because of her behind the scenes ability. People like Jack Odell, whose behind the scenes ability with SCLC was so awesome that the Kennedys begged Dr. King to fire him from staff. People like Julian Mayfield, who was a writer, who was an actor, who was a journalist, that dared to run guns to Robert Williams from Harlem to North Carolina with John Henry Clark and May Mallory 3 times in the summer of '61. People like Nathan Chamurira, Zimbabwe's foreign minister, Charles Utete, people who were more behind the scenes, because I think that we're at this point where history, one of the most beautiful characteristics of history is the challenges that it imposes on us. So for me at this point, at 51 years old, it's about being in a position to execute the ideas that we so passionately articulate. So I'm starting to gravitate to people who were just as effective behind the scenes as organizers, as communicators. Amilcar Cabral was outstanding at that. Ahmed Sekou Touré was outstanding at that. So we're at a point in our development where we're studying the work, how what it went into building things like the Harlem Renaissance, what it went into building the Black Arts Movement, what it went into building the cultural renaissance in Guinea, that Sekou Touré did, what it went into organizing the People's Militia, the steps, the techniques, the methods, the diplomacy, the ability to manipulate a situation to make people who may have been apathetic become enthusiastic. So at this point of my organizational development, that's how I'm taking a look at that. And I think that will bear fruit for some of the younger organizers out here, because if we're going to go from protest to resistance, we cannot just use platforms to voice our displeasure with our oppression and our exploitation and our dehumanization. We are obligated to show on a practical level how we're able to remedy every challenge we face. So I think that by doing that, so for example, when we talk about Du Bois, are we going to quote him? Or are we going to look at how they built the Peace Information Center, how he built the Council of African Affairs, how he built up the Crisis Magazine, how he built up the Phylon Magazine, how he built up the Moon Magazine? So that's where we are at this particular moment.
Okay, I think the audio is out.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, now I hear you now. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
so I'll repeat that. I was
Okay.
saying that we people Thomas Sankara said a long time ago that our revolution is not a public speaking tournament.
Right.
And
Okay.
so the criteria seems
Absolutely.
to be that if someone can get in front of a podium, bang the podium like a bass drum in a marching band, that's supposed to represent commitment. That's supposed to represent determination. That's supposed to represent discipline. Who's to say those who speak the loudest are the most committed?
Right.
Who's to say they're the most dependable? Who's to say they're most consistent, the most consistent? So, and people hear us and they're like, oh, you should be everywhere. I'm like, no, because if we're talking all the time, when do we get to do what we're talking about?
Exactly.
So just finding that balance between theory and practice. And
Right.
always, Osajifo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah said it best: practice without thought is blind, thought without action is empty. So but at this point, we are teaching our young people about the practical things that these great warriors did that complement their words. So we don't go over any historical figure or any movement that made impeccable contributions to our history without them knowing what they contributed specifically.
Right.
The challenges they had, the drawbacks they had, the setbacks they had, the momentum they gained, who has benefited from that activity.
Okay.
All of this is very important.
Okay. I was going to say, who inspired your writing? Because I got into writing really by force. My chairman, B. Duran in Southern California, he told me to write because I had to not only speak, but also write as, I guess, my organization's propagandist. How did you get into the writing aspect?
Oh, man. Well, from a very young age.
How long is this going to take? Because we got to leave.
A few minutes. And what happened is we just studied different people. So my dad talked to me about people who wrote with lucidity. So he introduced me to George Jackson's writing, to Steve Biko's writing, George Padmore's writing, J.A. Rogers' writing, Blyden's writing. So these are Dr. Carter G. Woodson's writing. And surprisingly, Dr. King's writing. And I say that because most of our people don't even know that Dr. King wrote books. And his writing is entirely different from his speaking.
Right.
So just getting a chance to study. And then, of course, we got to look at the sisters. So I'm a fan. I love Ida B. Wells' writing ability. Right. Shirley Graham Du Bois is one of my woman favorites. Claudia Jones. So because I'm a journalist, I study these different people when they wrote articles. The plays.
Seems like a natural segue.
Yeah. That's the other thing too.
Yeah.
So I like some of the stuff I've seen from Henrietta Vinton Davis, the Garveyite. I like the stuff that, of course, the Mary Baraka stuff is going to catch your attention. So different people, and then so it's an ongoing thing. But those were the journalistic influences.
Okay, all right. And you are an author. Are you an author?
I've just written plays.
Okay.
And I've written about 400 articles in Zimbabwe's national newspaper.
Okay.
There's a conversation about me putting those articles in book form.
Yes.
At some point, I will write. It's funny, when he was working on Dr. Khalid Muhammad's biography, Malik Shabazz, who I've known since 1990.
Okay.
He asked me, was I gonna write? And I laughed. I said, I've written 25 plays. I've written 400 articles.
Right.
Point, I will. And I'm thinking, I'm 51. Du Bois wrote Dark Order, his first biography at 50.
Oh, wow.
Then he wrote Dusk to Dawn when he was 75.
Wow.
And then he wrote the Soliloquy in his 90s. So so politically, I'm 31 years old.
Okay.
So I still have a lot of work to do before I start writing. But thanks to the articles, thanks to the plays, we already are, we wouldn't be picking it up for the first time. And we know that many of our great fighters, out of social pressure, they want to write before they leave us.
Yes.
But since it's not something they may be accustomed to doing, they feel rushed. So in our case, that's not going to be the situation.
Okay. Well, I can't wait till you pen your first book. And again, brother, you are so inspirational. What future projects do you have on the plan right now?
Well, this Cuban project is taking up our time. We want to do a project with schools in Southern Africa and Eritrea, because Eritrea is the only nation in Africa where education and healthcare are free.
Okay.
So we believe for that reason, and of course, you just you're connected to LA. Right. We lost a young brother, Amias Eshadon, who was known as Nipsey Hussle in the streets. Right. But the interesting thing is when people talk about him and they say, yeah, he transformed and he stopped being involved in the Rolling 60 Crips. But they don't tell people it's because he went home to Eritrea, spending time with his family and spending time in those communities. He realized what type of purpose he should have in his lifetime. Right. So we believe that the time has come for us to build, to connect all our schools, our HBCUs, our African independent schools to Eritrea, but not only that, to Southern Africa, because we have allowed Southern Africa's history to be reduced to the autobiographies of Nelson and Winnie Mandela. But we're talking about 14 nations. And it would be a beautiful thing to connect all those nations. Let's say, for example, we know 67% of the employment in Southern Africa is connected to the agroeconomy. And here we are with Tuskegee, the house that Booker T. Washington built, and George Washington projects in Southern Africa. Right. Wow. So we're pushing for those things right now. And we think, and if we say that we're taking a Pan-African approach to history, why are people treating West Africa like it's the entire continent? Right, right. So getting intimately connected to Southern Africa, getting intimately connected to a pivotal place in East Africa, and Eritrea will be attractive to us for another reason. When they fought their armed struggle, which lasted for 30 years, 33% of the guerrillas were women. That's the highest level of women in a guerrilla war in the history of the human race. Wow. So imagine a bunch of women thinking like Ida B. Wells, but are guerrillas, or like Septima Clark or Ella Baker or Ethel Minor. So that's what you had in Eritrea. So that story resonates with people. So we're pushing our HBCUs and our African independent schools to go ahead and have these connections. So that's what we're working on right now. And we have, we're always writing the plays. Our goal is to build branches of the Mass Emphasis Children's and History Theater Company all over the world. In the United States, where there are people who do not have a theater vehicle for children, we can set one up. Right. If you have a theater entity for children, but you're looking for content, we'll be glad to share our catalog with you. Or when you perform the content you've developed organically, we can perform together. Okay, right. Wow. Technology makes that possible. Absolutely. So last summer, before the pandemic, Brother Malik, we had a play that was supposed to take place in DC about Ahmed Sekou Touré and Mbalia Kamara called Ready for the Revolution. Okay. We had a play called Dim Parsley about the Parsley massacre that the Trujillo regime was responsible for in the Dominican Republic when they massacred our people out of Haiti. Right. We had one in Venezuela called Decolonization, Disconnection, and Repair. And we were working on one that would be performed in Guyana. So, and 2 years ago, we did a play called 1925, which was about the childhood of Brother Malcolm, the childhood of Frantz Fanon, and the childhood of Patrice Lumumba, who were all born in 1925, in case people didn't know. Wow, that's incredible. So that was performed. I knew two of them. and Medgar Evers and Lumumba were born the same day. Wow. And so what happened was we did that, and some young people performed it in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Okay. Thanks to our brother Maurice Carney and the Friends of the Congo. Okay. So we're getting around a little bit. Okay. How can people get more information and contact as we sum it up? Sure. If they can follow us on Instagram, through the let me pull it up to make sure, because I got to get used to all this social media. Oh yes, yeah, we all do. But yeah, we all do, right? Especially us young people. So on that front, we have hashtag Get Out of Cuba Way. hashtag unblock Cuba, hashtag Cuban blockade inhumane. Twitter, I'm at Junior Egbuna.
Okay.
At Junior Egbuna is how you can get me on Twitter. Email OBIEGBUNA15 at gmail.com.
Oh, wow. Well, brother, I just want to, first of all, give you so much respect, honor, and much love, brother, for all you've done and
It's
all
mutual.
you will continue to do as well.
It's mutual to you as well, man.
Thank you so much,
You're
brother.
You're a fighter in every sense of the word. And it's always a pleasure to, as the young people say, chop it up with those who embrace their African spirit like a mother embraces their newborn child. We thank you.
Oh, beautiful. Well, I can't go any further than that, brother. We're going to end it on that note. Well, again, thank you, brother. I got to have you back real soon. And,
anytime, Malik. We're at your service, brother.
Yes, and keep up the great work, brother.
And you as well.
Okay, my brother. You take care.
All right.